The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with all of this talk about the CR and where money is being spent and where taxpayer dollars should be spent, I want to remind Americans that there are 1.4 million Americans on active duty in our U.S. military. Another 718,000 civilian personnel support our men and women in uniform, and 1.1 million are the reserves or in the National Guard. The military is our nation's largest employer, and it's honorable work. Our fighting men and women are the best and the brightest, the bravest and the most battle-tested. They serve with distinction whether they are on bases here at home or in combat abroad, whether they are in the infantry or in military information technology. But once our soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines leave the service, shouldn't they be assured a job right here in America? Is that too much to ask of Congress? Is it too much to ask of America? Shouldn't their families know that they will have a roof over their heads, food on their table, and clothes on their back? The least that we can do for our veterans. But for too many veterans, unemployment and economic insecurity is what they're finding in civilian life. Recently, I asked unemployed veterans to send me their resumes and their stories so that I can submit them for the congressional record, to put their struggles front and center before our government. I heard from a number of veterans who sent their resumes to me at resumesfromveterans@mail.house.gov. I heard from Charles Diver of Plantation, Florida, who served for 4 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. He wrote that, quote, "In addition to being unemployed, many of us feel that our government has been less than forthcoming about the scope of the problem." I couldn't agree more. Mr. Diver has been unemployed since June of 2009. I think we owe him more than that for his service that he's given to our country. Vincent Torres of Las Vegas, Nevada told me, quote, "It's been a year since I've been discharged from the Army, and it's virtually been impossible for me to find work that matches my skill set in the civilian market. I believe within the next few years, unemployed veterans will be a bigger problem than it is now with the wars coming to a close," unquote. Mr. Torres last served in the Army's 1st Airborne Division, 509th Infantry Regiment Opposing Force. We should see to it that veterans like him can find meaningful work when they're back at home. I heard from Mr. Jay McGinn of Taylorsville, Kentucky, who wrote simply and poignantly, quote, "Out of work for a year and a half, despite and desperate for a job." He signed the short email, "Respectfully, J.G. Megan." We owe him more respect than unemployment for his 20 years of service in the United States Navy. I heard from Evelyn Thomas. She's a veteran of the Army, National Guard, and the Marine Corps and lives in Carlsbad, California. She enlisted in the military on the Montgomery GI Bill in order to earn money for college. She then obtained a master's degree in teaching, learning, and leadership. She told me, quote, "We need to create jobs. We need to provide avenues and opportunities for manufacturing and production companies to exist in the global economy. Now I am at a crossroads in which I must utilize my activism work to create a job. I must work to support my family. I want to work. Surely there's a position for an honorably discharged veteran with a master's degree." Indeed, there should be. But then, Mr. Speaker, I received what I think is the most striking email. It was from Tanya Batson, the wife of 12-year Navy veteran named Billy Batson. She didn't write much, just that Mr. Batson had been out of work since December of 2009, over a year after his military service ended. But imagine the anguish that Mr. and Mrs. Batson must be feeling. Imagine the uncertainty. I refuse to accept that any military spouse should feel that. No husband or wife who, after supporting their partner through military service, deployment, travel, and battle, should feel like they have to fight another battle right here at home to find a job, to provide for their family, to be financially secure. Mr. Speaker, we can do better. We can create an economy that employs all of our veterans. We need a jobs program that will pull Americans back to work, doing productive things for our society, teaching in classrooms, health clinics, home energy technicians, food pantry workers. We can create jobs that pay benefits to workers and the country without the kind of overhead and infrastructure in other projects. But, Mr. Speaker, we can do even better than creating jobs. We can eliminate unemployment as a factor in American life. In order to do that, I need to hear more stories like that from Mr. Diver, Mr. Torres, Mr. Megan, Ms. Thomas, and Mr. and Mrs. Batson. I know they're out there, so I'm calling on the unemployed veterans to send me their resumes and stories to resumesfromveterans@mail.house.gov. As I've said before, sending me your resume will not get you a job or put you in consideration for a job, but it can keep the unemployed problem front and center here in Washington. We need to do something, Mr. Speaker, so that all Americans, veterans and non-veterans alike, have work. We can do so much better. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.